Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Wink of an Eye, which is episode 13 of season 3 of Star Trek The Original Series. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek, the original series, one episode at a time. In this video, I will cover the episode Wink of an Eye. So Wink of an Eye is when the Enterprise respond to a distress call. They beam down to the planet to find no one is there. However, one of the security officers disappear, and when Kirk and crew bring back to the ship, they find that their systems are being sabotaged. And they later learn this is because there is a race that invaded the Enterprise that move at a very accelerated rate, so fast that no one can see them. And eventually one of them brings Kirk down to their accelerated level to the purposes of breeding with him. In fact, they reveal their true intentions, which is to keep the Enterprise trapped in and frozen in time, as they are a dying race that can no longer interbreed. So they need Kirk and crew to supply, gene pool, and they want to keep Kirk and a few others down to the planet to breed with them, and they will keep the rest of them frozen in time so they can go snatch them up every once in a while. Kirk, of course, is not okay with this plan, and with the help of Spock, who figures out what's going on, also gets accelerated. They manage to thwart the invaders, who are implied die off eventually without anyone to help them breed. So, I never really thought much of this episode. When I saw it on the list and I saw it was coming up, I wasn't that excited for it. I just always thought that this was another sort of forgettable season 3 episode. But you know what? After watching it, I was surprised how much I enjoyed it. I was surprised how effective this episode was. Now, I don't think it's by any means a great episode, and I wouldn't include it in any great list as a really good TOS episode, but it is effective enough. It was successful in sort of drawing me in, keeping me engaged. I was never bored. I was interested throughout, and I thought it was actually kind of a bit thrilling to see Kirk in this impossible situation, where the Enterprise was at a clear disadvantage. It looked like these aliens had the upper hand and were controlling everything, and I think that's what makes it sort of a really interesting episode to view, like when you have those impossible situations, and it seems like everything that Kirk tries to do fails. Now, it's not as bad or as frustrating as episodes like The Empath, where Kirk is just really, really at a disadvantage, and he never actually gets the upper hand. Where here, you feel like there is, even though these aliens have the upper hand, always in control, you feel like they can be taken down. And I find that personally more interesting. If they're not too invincible as to make the whole thing pointless and a hopeless exercise, like The Empath, that the aliens aren't that infallible. They just happen to have a huge advantage, and it's just a matter of how Kirk is going to take the advantage back, which of course we know that he will. And it makes the stakes high, and it makes it very interesting to see how that's going to occur, and how Kirk sort of uses his wits and his command knowledge to navigate this very difficult situation, and eventually find his way out of it. Now, I was watching a couple reviews on this episode that were pointing out all these logical flaws in the episode, which in the premise, which I actually didn't notice myself, and once they pointed it out, I was like, oh yeah, I guess you have a point. But I was like, whatever. Like this one reviewer really actively bothered him. And you know me, if you've seen my reviews, there are other episodes that have flaws that actively bother me that I cannot look past, that just gnaw at me. But this was not one of them. And the flaws in this episode, even once they were pointed out to me, I was like, whatever. I'm just able to, go with it and suspend disbelief. And that is how the acceleration works, because this is a key point in the episode. Now, I wasn't sure I agreed with this particular person's reasoning on a few examples, because they talked about, well, if this woman and Kirk are just standing still for a long time, wouldn't they be able to see them, or at least like get glimpses of them? But I think, from my understanding, is almost like they're it doesn't really matter whether or not they're physically moving or not, that their whole genetic makeup, that their whole atomic makeup is moving at a faster rate. So it doesn't really matter whether they're standing still or not, that it would still be impossible for them to see them. But then he also makes a good point with the phaser. So Kirk tries to fire a phaser at the woman invader, and the phaser is like super slow, and she just like steps out of the way. But if this phaser's actually moving at the same speed as Kirk has the rest of the crew, wouldn't the rest of the crew see it? Wouldn't they be on the bridge, and all of a sudden this phaser shot just goes out of nowhere and explodes on the wall, and they're like, what the fuck? But, to me, that's a minor nitpick. The bigger point, which actually makes a big deal, is the turbolift and the doors. Because we see when they're in this accelerated rate, the aliens and Kirk use the turbolift to get to places, but wouldn't the turbolift be operating at the same speed as the rest of the crew? So if they got in a turbolift, wouldn't it take them like hours upon hours to get to their destination? And the doors also work at the same speed as anyone. Would the doors even notice them or recognize them to even open at all? And even if they did open, they would take forever to open. Now, obviously, this would slow down the episode and be a really big, huge nuisance to show. In fact, apparently the original script had the aliens realizing this and when they sabotage the Enterprise, the first thing they do is open all the doors and make it so all the doors on the ship are stuck open, and of course the crew has no idea why that is. But that would explain it, but I mean, is it really necessary? And that doesn't explain the turbolifts, by the way. And also, I noticed something I noticed myself is that the transporter, because they talked about, we went into the transporter to beam up, and it was a really long, arduous, slow process, which makes sense because the transporters would be working at the speed of, the normal people, the normal Enterprise crew, and so for them it would seem to take forever. However, later in the episode, we see them beaming down to the planet, and they beam down. We see those aliens beaming down, and they beam down at a normal speed, which shouldn't actually be the case. It should take them forever to beam down. Just saying. And the other person, the podcaster, had complaints of, the transporter needs to lock on to these people. If they're moving too fast and they can't recognize them, they wouldn't be able to lock on, they wouldn't be able to transport them up. But I disagree with that, because there are several examples of them showing the people beaming with other people. Like if someone's beaming up and another person grabs them and gets in their same beam, then they will also be beamed up. We saw this in Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, and I think there's a few other examples of this, that by just being trapped in that beam will also transport them up. However, I guess later in the episode we see the aliens beam down themselves without any other normal speed people around. So how would the transporter lock on to them? I don't know. But anyway, all this shit aside, I don't really care. As I said, I didn't even notice it until it was pointed out to me, and I noticed the transporter thing. But once it was pointed out to me, I was like, I guess they're right. I mean, to me, the science and logic of the original series, like, this is not the worst I've seen. I've seen much worse. As I mentioned, there's other episodes where the reasoning and the logic behind it just actively bothers me and annoys me, and I just simply cannot look past it. Sorry. Hi, Holden. He wants to look around. Anyway, I simply can't look past it. But here it's like, whatever. It's the original series. I'll just go with it because I think the original series actually done way worse than that. But what I actively noticed more than that is I think the episode's very unclear on just how fast the other people, these aliens, are moving at, and what the ratio is compared to, the Enterprise crew at the normal speed, and what the actual difference is. Because I think it's inconsistent on the time rates in between these two. Because we have the scene where we see Spock, after Kirk disappears, Spock goes around and analyzes it, and we stay with this time frame for quite a bit, and we go back to the accelerated speed, and it seems like not that much time has passed. Now they could say that just a lot of time happened off screen, but I don't think so. I think that would be just a lame excuse, because it doesn't seem that way. Like Kirk, his character hadn't changed that much, and the story itself hadn't really changed that much. And particularly the one scene that really, really got me is when Spock told Scotty to go down to the transporter room. And in the very next scene, we see this accelerated time. Scotty is standing in the doorway of the transporter room, and he remains standing in the doorway of the transporter room pretty much for the rest of the accelerated time story frame. Like, all this stuff happens, and you would at least think that Scotty would have made it inside the transporter room. So I don't know. The time frames are a bit off. And then there's the red shirt Compton, who disappears when they're on the planet, and then Kirk finds that he's with the aliens, and he's been like totally brainwashed by them, and he's like tries to lock Kirk out of the environmental room, and is like helping the aliens take over the ship. And in fact, he's the one who like gave them a tour and showed them like how to take over the ship. And I don't buy that he would be so brainwashed by these aliens so quickly. But again, that's when the different time frames, like how fast are they moving? Because you could say that there was a fair amount of time that passed between the scene with him on the planet and by the time Kirk meets him, that it could have been, in their timeline, it could have been actually quite a long time. But I think it would be inconsistent with how the rest of the episode plays out to say that it had been years. And I think it would have needed to be years in order for me to buy that the Simpson would be so brainwashed by them. I mean, if there was like 2 or 3 years have passed since then okay, I could buy it, but I think it would need to be that long, and judging by the rest of the episode, how the time rates sort of interfere or intermix, that would be inconsistent. It shouldn't have been years. Like, I think at best it would have been like 6 or 8 months, and I still wouldn't buy that he would be that brainwashed in that short of a time frame. Just me. I mean, he is just a red shirt after all. And to be fair, like, he was still devoted to Kirk. Like, when the alien attacked him, he got pissed off and attacked the alien, and then the alien killed him and blamed Kirk for it because, he's a red shirt, so he has to die. But, Yeah, so yeah, I don't know. That storyline seemed a bit off to me. It also seemed off to me, like when Kirk pretended to be all devoted to them. It was like, yes, why don't we go down to the planet right now? And the alien, she actually bought it. Like, what kind of moron do you have to do? Because it wasn't like a long, arduous process for Kirk. You know, talking about a red shirt, I was thinking that it should take years. For Kirk, it should take nearly a decade for him, the captain who loves his crew, who loves his ship, for him to instantly go from I want to fight you at every point possible to a point of like sheer stubbornness to all of a sudden being like, oh, why are we still here? Are we going to beam down to the planet? I mean, I don't buy that she bought this. Like, no one's that stupid. I mean, granted, her biggest hope was that Kirk would fall in line with them, but are they using like chemicals to brainwash them? Because they don't say that they are, and if they're not, why the fuck would she think, like, even if you allow, say, the time frame in this was going, let's say it's actually been several months, this storyline, I think to say it would have been more than several months would be inconsistent with how this episode is portrayed. Even several months, I think, is stretching it a bit. But let's say it had been several months. That's still bullshit. And especially, like, from one scene to the next, he's very, like, rebellious, vigilant. I'm going to defeat you resist at every possible turn to, oh, I love you, let's beam down to the planet. Like, the space in between those scenes, not enough time, no matter what you say, what anyone would say, not enough time has passed to make that logical. Now, you could argue that she was just seeing what she wants to see, but I would argue back that she would have to be a fucking moron to not at least be skeptical, which she wasn't. She completely, like, she called the aliens, like, oh, don't worry, Kirk's on our side now, he's coming around. Like, no one's that dumb. No one is that dumb. Sorry, no one is. That's just that was a stupid plot point that Kirk actually got away. And plus, the way he was behaving was also, it was just so out of character for him. It was like, oh, well, that's silly. They'll be, and when she's like, aren't you going to be worried about your crew? And he's like, oh, they'll be okay. Like, no, I realized they had just met Kirk, but still, just knowing him from the brief time span of this episode where he's like resisting and like he was being so stubborn, he like grabbed the device with both hands, even though knowing that it would do nothing but cause him pain, and going instantly from that to, oh, let's go down to the planet, I don't care about the crew. Come on. That is what stretches my suspension of disbelief. The fucking turbo lifts and the doors, I don't really give a shit about. Like S'more's doors, I can go with suspension of disbelief on that. But the fact that anyone would be fooled by Kirk instantly switching, that is stretching it. That is what stretches my suspension of disbelief. But anyway, but yeah. But as I talked about, like, I think, like, the storyline actually really worked for me because it presented a mystery. Ensign disappeared, and then there's this weird humming sound. Like, I like the way they built this mystery, and then Kirk disappears, and we get the exposition of them explaining the different time rates, and you know, they're in this possible situation. There's this device that's being implanted on the Enterprise that's going to, like, freeze them all, and there's like nothing he can do about it. Every time he tries to get anywhere near it, the aliens like shoot him down, overwhelm him, and you know, Kirk of course has to use his Kirk charm to charm the enemy, because you know that's the original series for you. But I still found it really interesting, and also found interesting like Spock trying to put it together and then finding a way to accelerate himself. Although I am disappointed Spock actually doesn't end up doing much. I mean, he is helpful to Kirk in helping him take down the aliens, but this stage Kirk was already having the upper hand. But yeah, so I found it a very I was surprisingly engaged. I thought I was surprisingly interested in what was going on, and I could buy and it was an interesting concept that the aliens were dying off and they couldn't breed anymore, and that they needed alien outsiders, and it was implied that this is something they've done before, that they through different generations that they snatch ships up, keep them frozen, and use them as breeding stock, and so they kind of got complacent and used to doing this. So that was a really interesting concept, and I get it was very actually kind of similar to the Kelvins in what's that episode called? By Any Other Name, where they're just used to they don't even think of a diplomatic solution because they're just used to doing it this way. But the biggest complaint, however, I do have about this episode is the ending, because when Kirk gets the better of them, Kirk is trying to come up with a solution. Okay, well, we could put your people in the suspended animation until, we can get our best minds of the Federation on this to make sure that your entire race, survives. Kirk even says at one point, is what do you want? How do you want to proceed? And she's well, quit toying with me. You defeated us, you won. And Kirk's no, but I'm willing to work with you to help you save your race. And her ultimate answer is, nah, we're just gonna die off. We deserve to. There's nothing to it. And then Kirk goes with that. He's okay, fine, I'll beam you back to the planet. You guys can just die off. Because Kirk makes it clear that the Federation's gonna put all these warning buoys around the planet and warn others not to go there, and to make it impossible for them to trap people off, and so they're just going to die out because they're not going to be able to procreate. And that doesn't make any sense to me. Why don't they negotiate more to come up with it seems like if these aliens were I get that this was their way of life and this is how they're used to it, so they would reject this sort of peace offering to begin with, but at this stage, they're facing annihilation. They've been defeated, as she said, and they're out of options. And it seems ridiculous to me at that stage, when their choices are work with the Federation or go extinct, they choose to go extinct. And why? I don't buy that they would choose that, and I don't buy that Kirk would give up so easily and let them do that. I think he would push more pushback to, no, let us help you. We can, and even if they refused, maybe they would go send people to help them regardless, but but be aware and not let them sort of take over their ship or whatever. And then it's implied at the end of the episode that they're just going to die off, that they're just going to be wiped out. In fact, they kind of get the sense that they're wiped out already, which again does not line up with the time frame that they should actually, take at least a year, and even in Kirk's time, before they would grow old and die off. I would say several years. And by Uhura accidentally pressing, the message, and Kirk sees the hot chick on the screen, he gets kind of nostalgic, and they have this tinge of sadness that they're gonna die off, but they don't have to. And it doesn't make sense that they would choose to, and it doesn't make sense that Kirk would let them. I think that he should have forced that. The suspended animation was a good idea. Put them in suspended animation, and maybe they could move them to a different planet where other people were willing to take them in and interbreed with them to keep their society going. Or maybe colonists would be willing to settle on this planet and help their stocks going. Or they could find genetic solutions to maybe, as I said, the scientists could find genetic solutions to allow them to interbreed with them themselves. Or, there's tons of different ways that you could resolve the situation other than just going, oh, well, I guess they're going to go extinct. Fuck them. I mean, I do get that they tried to, take over the ship and kill everyone, but, or keep them frozen forever, but still, Kirk was acting very sympathetic to them, and so it's out of character for him to just be like, yeah, fuck them. Whatever. Let's just fuck off now. She was a good lay, but now it's time for me to fuck off for my next adventure. Kirk. Anyway, speaking of getting laid, this was actually kind of controversial in some circles for the fact that there was a scene where Kirk was making out with a chick, and then we cut to commercials, and then the next time we see him, Kirk is putting his boot back on. Whoa, he's putting his boot back on. Do you know what that means? That means they were kicking boots or whatever. I don't know. That means he got laid. And people were making a big deal out of that. But come on, it's always been implicit that Kirk's been having sex with all these hot women. What do you think? They just kiss and that's all there is to it? You think that, no, we want to be pure. No, Kirk likes to bang. That's been very clear. The fact that we see him putting his boot on, big fucking deal. Ooh, so now they're implying that they're taking their shoes off during sex. So that they're having sex in between scenes. That is so implicitly implied. I think it's ridiculous that this was even controversial at all. Because this time they really implied it, and yet, of course, in more modern shows, even on shows that air on TV, you actually see them in bed together. Which of course in the 60s is they won't even let you see them put their shoes back on. I don't know. It's really stupid to me. But I guess that's my modern perspective or whatever the fuck. But anyway, let me bring up the Voyager episode, Blink of an Eye. And I think the biggest comparison or the most similarities that episode bears to this one is the title. Because the episode titles are basically the same thing. One says wink, one says blink. And, of course, they also both deal with aliens that are living in a very accelerated time rate that's very different than the rest of the galaxy, our normal characters. But that's where the similarities end. Otherwise, the episodes are entirely different because Blink of an Eye is more about an entire world that evolves, and we get to see them from the primitive days all the way up to advanced technological civilization, and they do that in the span of just Voyager visiting their planet for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. And so for the Voyager crew, only a few weeks has passed. We're here, that's been millennia. And so that's the other thing that I would say that the Voyager episode does better, is that it makes it very, very clear what the time rate. As I said, it was inconsistent in this episode just how fast the aliens were moving compared to our main crew. We're here in Voyager, they make it very clear, in fact, that it is super, super fast. It is way faster. I think they even say the direct time frame that I can't remember I can't remember what it was, but it's a minute for every hour. So an hour passes for every minute or something like that. But I think it might have been even more than that. I think they might have implied 3 or 4 hours would pass in 1 minute on Voyager. But regardless, my foggy memory aside, they do make it very clear what the time rate, and they're more consistent with it. And it's just a better episode in every way, shape, or form. They take better advantage of the premise than this episode does, which is maybe why I was remembering this episode as being not that good, because I was comparing it to that Voyager episode, which is an unfair comparison to make because that's one of the best episodes of Voyager, where this is kind of just at best an average episode of TOS. So it wasn't fair to make that comparison because... And as I said, when I judged this episode on its own merits and just how suspenseful it was in this situation, how invested I was, and how exciting it was to see Kirk try to take his ship back, it actually worked. It actually worked in that regard. Minor nitpicking complaints aside, I think the biggest dent against this episode is the ending, however, because I would have liked to see a better ending where they actually saved these people. I think the melancholy, sorrowful ending with seeing them on the view screen wasn't earned because they shouldn't have left them to die. But, yeah. Other than that, I thought it was a very effective episode. So now, I would like to thank my Patreon supporters for supporting me on Patreon. Really... very much appreciated. It helps the channel thrive, and it really helps me keep going, so I can't thank you guys enough. So I will try by reading out your names, starting with Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joel Viles, Brian A., Alessandro Miguelicio, Norman Buckwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, Allison Fordyce, and Brandon Neal House. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. Now, before I read out my Patreon comments, I do want to mention that Brandon Neal House did not get a chance to make a comment on this episode, and I was a bit disappointed because for a lot of season 3, Brandon has been pointing out the crappy costumes that these aliens have been wearing, like the aliens from Alana Troy wearing placemats, and and I can't remember what that alien from And the Children Shall Lead was wearing, like a carpet or something. And I was really hoping he would point out that, and I guess I shall have to be the one to point it out, that the aliens in this episode were wearing trash bags. They're wearing trash bags. I think, like, the woman, she had a interesting enough costume. It's, of course, very scantily clad and revealing because obviously hot chick hitting on Kirk. But the men were wearing trash bags. They were wearing trash. Anyway, sorry. Anyway, let me go ahead and read the comments that I did get on this episode, starting with the one from Matty Jester that said, I've just enjoyed this episode as a rewatch. I barely remembered it beyond it being like that Voyager episode Blink of an Eye, but not as good. I still think the Voyager one is much better, but this episode isn't too bad, really. The premise is decent, and the aliens seem like an actual threat. They can't be dealt with like a normal intruder. They're just too fast, so some Kirk trickery mixed with Spock and McCoy ingenuity will save the day. Although I don't think the time difference quite adds up. I feel like the device would be activated long before anyone figured out there was even a problem and moved at much at all. Also, it's a shame that the Skolosians are doomed. Maybe Starfleet Medical could have helped them. Nope. See you later, Delia. Oh well. All in this isn't anything great, but an enjoyable watch. 6 out of 10 from me. So, a lot of the same points I made, so pretty much agree with many on there. So next comment is from Ricky, who says, it's a decent episode, certainly one of the better ones of Season 3. I like the concept of these group of aliens that can move faster than most people to the point where you can't see them. However, it does drag a bit long for my taste, and the Kirk and the woman romance, once again, I found a bit cheesy. I'm certainly not one of those fanboys who like seeing Kirk get another chick, so my rating is a 6 out of 10. Now, will disagree in one instance that's one of the better ones of season 3. I think it is a decent one of season 3, but I think there's a group of really good episodes that people underrate in season 3. I think, and this wouldn't be in the top tier of season 3, but it's not in the bottom tier or even the middle tier. It's kind of in the okay tier. So my rating for Wink of an Eye out of 10 is a 7. Very good. So I'm going a bit higher than my Patreon supporters. I actually enjoyed this episode a lot. I thought it was really suspenseful, and I think it kept me engaged. And like the fact that when that other alien guy the boyfriend was jealous of Kirk and tried to kick his ass, that was a really intense scene because all he has to do is sort of scratch Kirk and he's dead. And so that was kind of intense. I love how Kirk's first reaction was to get the chair out and like hold it up because he needed to have a barrier against the guy because he could kill him so easily. So those are nice touches, and I think the ending should have been handled better for sure. And it has some other plot contrivances which I'm just willing to, they don't really bother me. I'm willing to go with them because it was such an interesting concept and it was pulled off really well and it kept me engaged. Another thing I wanted to mention about this episode is the music style was basically, they used that music from The Cage a lot, which sets it apart from season 3. It didn't really feel like because season 3 to me has very different music than the other seasons, which is what makes it distinct. And so this episode didn't feel like a season 3 episode in that regard. It felt more like a season 1 or 2 episodes because they kept using that Cage episode music. Sorry, if you know the music where it goes kind of like that music too, and I thought it worked well in this episode anyway. So yeah, I think this is a good episode, a decent episode. It has to say not top tier season 3, but definitely like second tier. Like, yeah, decent, good. Season 3 does not suck as much as people say it is. I really do disagree with that. But anyway, that is it for my review of Wink of an Eye. So, I shall be back, let's see right here, next Monday with another new review on my channel, That Which Survives. And Wednesday I will be back over on Patreon for another revisited video where I revisit my review for Let That Be Your Last Battlefield. And Thursday, back public on my channel with a new review for Whom Gods Destroy, because I am not an insect, I am a lord. I am so looking forward to reviewing that episode. And then Saturday, another new review public on my channel, The Mark of Gideon. And then like, yeah, this is where the season 3 slumps a bit for me, but yeah, I'll get into that episode. So yeah. Also, please remember that next month I will be doing a top 10 best and worst Star Trek as voted by you, the viewer. So please remember to vote in those polls if you haven't already. Well, not polls, if you just leave a comment below on any one of my videos and leave your top 10 best episodes of Star Trek the Original Series and top 10 worst episodes of Star Trek the Original Series. They will be contabulated and added up all together, where I will be doing a live stream with my sister sometime in June to show the results of what the top 10 best and worst Star Trek episodes are as voted by you, the viewer. Very looking forward to that, so please be sure to participate in that. Be sure to check out my channel for all that and more Star Trek reviews, as well as many other videos on many other shows. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.